Mara did not arrive at Thornvale like someone who belonged there. She arrived the way a wrong letter arrives, delivered to the right address, opened by the wrong hands, read in confused silence. The van that brought her from the bus station was driven by a pack elder who introduced himself as Brother Oswin and then did not speak for 40 minutes. The forest swallowed the road. The trees got older. The air changed, thicker, greener, something underneath it that Mara's body recognized before her brain did. A low hum in the chest, like a tuning fork, held too close to the ribs. She pressed her forehead against the window and watched the pines go by, and told herself this was fine. It was not fine. Her mother had died 11 months ago, lung cancer, which was a very human way to die for a woman who had spent 30 years pretending to be one. The hospice nurses had loved her. She tipped the food delivery people with folded handwritten notes. She kept a small pot of rosemary on the windowsill, even when she couldn't smell anymore. What she had not kept was information. About the pack, about Mara's father, whoever he was, about the thing that happened sometimes in Mara's hands when she was angry, the heat, the shimmer, the sense of something trying to climb out of her skin. What she left instead was a letter. 3 pages, her handwriting getting shakier toward the end. The words debt and obligation, and you will be safe there, I promise, and then, at the bottom, in the steadiest letters on the page, I would have told you sooner, but I didn't know how to tell you and not lose you. Mara had read it 4 times, folded it back up, put it in her coat pocket. She had not taken it out since. Brother Oswin pulled up to a gate that opened before he touched the intercom. The house behind it was not what she expected. She had imagined something Gothic, stone towers, candles, the aesthetic of something that had decided to be dramatic about itself. What she found instead was a very large farmhouse, well-maintained, white trim, a porch that wrapped around the whole front, 2 rocking chairs, a dog sleeping in one of them. She got out of the van. The dog opened one eye, looked at her, and closed it again. Okay, she thought. At least the dog isn't performing anything. The Alpha King was standing in the doorway. Mara had been told, by Brother Oswin's 2 sentences of total communication on the drive, that she would be meeting the Alpha and that she should be respectful. She had not been told he would look like that. She would not describe what he looked like. She had made a private rule, standing there in the gravel driveway with her single duffel bag and her dead mother's letter in her pocket, that she would not let herself be stupid about this. She'd had enough stupid in her life. She had a category for it, a shelf, labeled and dated. What she noticed was this. He didn't come down the steps to meet her. He stood at the top of them. He looked at her the way you look at a weather report for a city you're not traveling to, with mild interest, no urgency, already thinking about something else. He said, Mara Voss, not a question. She said, that's me. He nodded. He turned and went back inside. She picked up her bag and followed him. That was how it started. His name was Kael and Dusk, and he ran a pack of 400 wolves spread across 3 counties, and he had been alpha since he was 26, which meant he had been alpha for 7 years, which meant he had spent 7 years making decisions that affected 400 lives, which meant he had not slept a full night in 7 years, which meant the particular exhaustion behind his eyes was not rudeness. It just looked like it from the outside. Mara learned this slowly. She learned it the way you learn a neighborhood, 1 corner at a time, mostly on foot, mostly alone. He gave her a room on the 2nd floor. It had a window that looked out over a kitchen garden gone slightly wild, rosemary, thyme, sage, a mint plant that had given up the concept of borders and simply become the left third of the bed. She stood at the window for a long time the first night, looking at the mint, thinking about her mother's windowsill pot, not letting herself cry because she was in a stranger's house and she did not know the sound situation. She cried anyway, quietly, into a pillow. Then she washed her face, went downstairs, found the kitchen, made herself toast, and sat at the long wooden table alone at midnight eating it. Kael came downstairs at 12:15 for water and found her there. He looked at the toast. He looked at her. She looked back. There's a jar of that honey, he said. 3rd shelf, behind the vinegar, the dark one. Then he filled his glass and went back upstairs. She found the honey. It was exceptional. Wildflower and something smoky underneath. She ate her toast and stared at the kitchen garden through the dark glass and did not know what to make of any of it. The pack was curious about her in the way a town is curious about something that moves into the house on the hill, at a distance, with theories. They were not unkind. The head healer, a woman named Petra, with short silver hair and the focused manner of someone who had been interrupting people mid-sentence for 40 years, and felt good about it, introduced herself on Mara's third morning, and then, without asking, handed her a pair of garden gloves. "The east side of the greenhouse needs turning," Petra said. "The tomatoes are furious about something, and I don't have time to figure out what." Mara turned the soil. The tomatoes, as far as she could tell, were furious about overwatering. She adjusted the drainage. She came back the next day, and the day after, and by the end of the week she had unofficially adopted the greenhouse. Nobody said anything. Petra brought her tea. The tomatoes recovered. Kael walked past the greenhouse door on a Tuesday morning, slowed, looked in at her through the glass for about 4 seconds, and kept walking. She didn't look up. She had learned by then the shape of his footsteps. They shared meals. Pack meals were a production. Long tables, rotating cooking duties, 40 or 50 people most evenings, loud, multilingual, someone always arguing about the bread. Kael sat at the head of the main table and managed the room with the kind of quiet attention that looks like passivity, until you notice that the argument about the bread resolves because he asked one question, and the logistics problem from the East Territory untangles because he said 4 words to the right person across the table. He sat across from Mara. He asked how the greenhouse was. She told him about the tomatoes. He listened, actually listened, not the performance of listening, and then said, "There's an old drainage map in the basement storage. Might show you where the original pipes ran." She found the map. He had been right. This happened in various forms. He offered exactly the precise piece of useful information and then said nothing else. She began to wonder if he talked to anyone the way other people talked. She began to watch, from the end of the table, who he relaxed with. Nobody, as far as she could see. He laughed once, a real one, caught off guard, when one of the younger pack members dropped a full tureen of soup directly onto Brother Oswin's shoes, just for a second. Then it was gone, but she had seen it. She filed it on a shelf in the back of her mind, in the category she had not yet named. 3 months in, she realized she had feelings she had not consented to. This was annoying. She had a system for feelings. You named them, you put them somewhere sensible, you did not let them make decisions. The system had served her well through a childhood moving between cities with a mother who never stayed put and never said why. It had served her through college on a scholarship she'd worked 3 jobs to supplement. It had served her through the last year, the hospice, the letter, the van, the farmhouse, Thornvale. Feelings about Kael Dusk did not fit the system, because he was not doing anything. That was the problem. He was not pursuing her. He was not performing interest. He brought her the map. He confirmed, across 14 separate conversations at the dinner table, that she was a person whose observations he took seriously. He did not touch her. He did not look at her the way men look at women they've decided to want. He looked at her like she was a specific kind of weather, present, real, something to factor in. She didn't know what to do with that. She went to the greenhouse and took it out on a very innocent pot of basil and then felt guilty about it and apologized to the basil, which was an all-time low, she thought, and also completely something her mother would have done. She laughed alone in the greenhouse. It didn't feel as bad as it should have. The thing about Kael that nobody had told her, that she had to figure out herself, one corner at a time, was that he never slept. Not really. She was a light sleeper, always had been. 2 a.m. was her witching hour, the hour she'd been trained into by years of her mother's bad nights. She woke without alarm, lay in the dark, and sometimes got up and went downstairs. He was always already there, not always in the kitchen. Sometimes in the study, papers spread across the desk, reading glasses on. She hadn't known about the glasses until the 3rd time she caught him with them, and he did not take them off, which meant he'd decided she wasn't worth hiding it from, which she chose to take as progress. Sometimes just sitting in one of the porch rocking chairs in the dark, not rocking, looking at the tree line. She sat in the other one, once. They didn't speak. They sat for maybe 20 minutes in the dark. An owl said something. The trees said something back. She went inside when she got cold. He was still there when she looked back from the doorway. She thought about asking. She didn't. She had been at Thornvale for 5 months when she understood she was going to stay. Not because she had been told to. Not because of the debt or the obligation or whatever Brother Oswin had called it on the drive. Those things had blurred. The pack had absorbed her the way healthy soil absorbs rain. Not dramatically, just thoroughly. Petra had taught her which herbs the pack healers used. 3 of the younger women had adopted her for their Tuesday trail runs. The kitchen had learned she could make 6 things exceptionally well and let her make them without supervision. She had found a rhythm. What she had not found was Kael. He was present in every external sense. Every meal, every pack meeting, every formal event. Correct, attentive, thorough. She watched him make decisions that balanced 400 lives like a man who had been doing it forever, and found no romance in it, just the weight of it, absorbed and carried without complaint. She watched him be kind, not warm. Kind is different from warm. Warm is a thing you do with your face. Kind is what you do at midnight when someone needs a map, and you know where it is. She watched him be kind 40 times and still not know what he had for breakfast, or whether he'd ever wanted a different life, or who he called when things were very bad. She thought, he is a locked room I have been handed a key to and told not to use. She thought, this is not sustainable. She did not try the key. The bond was its own conversation. She had read about it. Her mother's letter had mentioned it, in the careful language of someone trying to explain something without panicking anyone. The pull between fated wolves. The way it worked at the edges of you, like pressure from the inside, wanting. She felt it as heat. Low, constant, directional. She had felt it since the driveway. She was certain he felt it too. She was also certain, watching the precise way he maintained distance, the exact gap he kept, the careful choreography of every room they shared, that he had decided to manage it rather than follow it. She respected that, in the infuriating way you respect something that is simultaneously making your life harder. She did not push. She turned soil and tended tomatoes and sat in second rocking chairs at 2 a.m. and waited, without knowing what she was waiting for something to shift. What shifted was not what she expected. She got sick in November. Not badly. A cold, normal human, boring. She spent 2 days in bed with tea and a book, and the particular indignity of a runny nose. On the second afternoon, there was a knock at her door. She said, "Come in," assuming it was Petra, with more of the herbal tincture she'd left that morning. Kael came in. He had a bowl of soup, actual soup, in an actual bowl, with a spoon balanced carefully across the top. He set it on the nightstand. He looked at her, the red nose, the book face down on the pillow, the general evidence of being very unimpressively ill, and he said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "You need to drink more water than you think." Then he left. She stared at the soup. It was perfect. Some kind of chicken broth situation with soft vegetables and what tasted like half a head of garlic, which she personally thought was the right amount of garlic. She ate all of it. She lay in the dark afterward and pressed her hand against her sternum where the bond lived and thought, "You are making this very difficult." She was not sure if she meant him or herself. They had been living in this specific form of together for 10 months when Mara found out she was pregnant. She sat on the edge of the bathroom sink for a long time. Then she went downstairs. He was in the study. Papers. Glasses. That specific stillness that meant he'd been at it for hours and hadn't noticed. She said, "I need to tell you something." He looked up. She told him. He went very still. Not the managed stillness of the study. A different kind. Something moving behind the surface of it. She watched his face the way she'd been watching it for 10 months, cataloging micro-expressions, and she saw something that looked like fear and something that looked like grief, and then, underneath both, something that looked like, she couldn't name it. He stood up. He came around the desk. He stopped in front of her. He put one hand on her shoulder. Not a grip, a placement, careful, deliberate, like he was measuring something. He said, "You'll have everything you need. I'll make sure of it." She waited. That was all he said. She nodded. She went back upstairs. She lay in the dark and put her hand on her stomach and thought about what everything you need meant, said in that voice, by a man who had never once told her what he needed. She thought it was the saddest thing she had ever been given. She named the boy Eli. Eli Voss Dusk, the paperwork said, which was a compromise she'd insisted on and Kaelin had agreed to without discussion, which told her he understood it as the declaration it was. He was born in the Thornvale birthing room with Petra and 2 other healers, and Kaelin standing in the corner with his arms folded and his face doing nothing at all except for his eyes, which were not doing nothing, which were doing everything, which Mara saw from the middle of the most physically ridiculous experience of her life, and catalogued and filed in the back of her mind in the shelf that still had no name. Eli arrived like he'd been somewhere else and had simply decided this was where he meant to be. He looked at Kaelin first. Kaelin looked back at him. Something happened in the air between them. She felt it, even then, even through the exhaustion, a recognition, not the bond, something older. She thought, these two already know each other. She did not know then why that thought pulled at her. Eli was, from the beginning, a specific kind of child. He didn't fuss. He watched. He had the eyes of someone running calculations. By 18 months he was collecting things. Not toys, things. Pine cones with interesting shapes. Pebbles that had cracked a particular way. A single wing feather that had fallen from something large. He arranged them on the windowsill of his room with a seriousness that would have been funny if it weren't also slightly authoritative. By 2 he was talking in full sentences with the word choice of a much older person. Not precocious in the showy sense. He didn't perform it. He just used words precisely, which meant sometimes the precision made adults stop what they were doing and look at him. Mara had her hands full with him in the best possible way. She brought him to the greenhouse. He sat in the dirt and talked to the plants with the same matter-of-fact tone he used for everything, and Mara, who had been doing the same thing for 2 years, did not find this strange. Kaelin came to the greenhouse more often, once Eli was old enough to sit up by himself in the corner. He didn't take over. He didn't redirect anything. He would lower himself to sitting on the floor beside his son, this enormous man, alpha of 400 wolves, sitting cross-legged in a greenhouse next to a toddler who was having a detailed conversation with a tomato plant, and just be there. Eli would lean into him. Kaelin's hand would settle on Eli's back. Neither of them would say anything. Mara would turn soil and not look at them directly, and feel something in her chest that she could not file anywhere because it did not fit any shelf she had. The birds started when Eli was 3. A sparrow hit the greenhouse window. It happened sometimes. The birds got confused by the glass and fell into the bed of herbs below. Mara went to pick it up. Eli got there first. He held it in both hands, cupped, careful. He looked at it for a long time. "It's broken inside," he said. "I know, baby. It happens sometimes." He looked at her, then back at the bird. He kept looking at it. And then, Mara saw it. She was 3 feet away. She was not imagining it. The bird moved. Not a twitch. A breath. A real one. The small barrel of its chest inflating. Its eye blinking open. Eli set it on the bench. It sat there for a moment. Then it flew. Mara stood very still. Eli looked at his hands. Then at her. "It was easy," he said, as though this required explaining. She crouched down in front of him. She held his face in her hands. She looked at him very carefully. "Has this happened before?" she said. He thought about it. "The caterpillar in June," he said. "And Brother Oswin's back. But I just sat next to him. I didn't touch." She sat down on the floor of the greenhouse, right there in the dirt, and held her son, and breathed. She told Kaelin that night. She told him standing in the kitchen while he was washing dishes, because the mundane setting felt necessary, because she needed something solid and ordinary underneath what she was saying. He turned off the water. He stood with his back to her for a moment. Then he turned around. His face was the most open she had ever seen it. Not open in the way of softness, open like a door into a dark room, and she couldn't see the far wall, and she didn't know if that meant the room was large or if it meant something was standing in it. "I know," he said. She waited. "I've known since he was born." The kitchen was very quiet. "Since he was born," she said. "The way he looked at me." He stopped. He looked at his hands, which were still slightly wet, and she watched him decide something, and she watched him decide not to say it. "He has an old gift, very rare." "How rare?" "One documented case. In the last century." She looked at him. He looked at the counter. "What aren't you telling me?" she said. It was not a question. He said, "Not tonight." She thought about pushing. She looked at his face, the door, the dark room, the thing she couldn't see, and she thought, he has been carrying something. She had known it for 2 years. She had watched it in the 2 a.m. rocking chair. She had watched it in the way he touched Eli's hair at bedtime, like memorizing. She said, "Okay, not tonight." She went upstairs. She lay in the dark with her hand over her heart and thought about what one documented case meant and why he'd said it the way you say something you've read too many times. Eli turned 4 in the spring. His party was small, pack children, Petra, a cake Mara made from scratch because she had opinions about cake. Kael sat at the end of the table and watched his son work through the logistics of blowing out 4 candles with the single-mindedness of someone approaching a technical problem. 4 candles, all at once. He'd practiced. He got them. Kael made a sound, not a laugh, something underneath a laugh, something that only existed for about 2 seconds and was gone before anyone else registered it. Mara registered it. She filed it on the shelf with no name, which was getting very full. The morning Eli told her was a Saturday. Mara was at the kitchen table with her tea and a stack of seed catalogs she'd been meaning to go through for a month. The light was good. It came through the kitchen window in the particular way of spring mornings, that golden green kind, and she had both hands around her mug and was reading about heritage tomato varieties, which was a very nice way to spend a morning. Eli came downstairs. He was in his pajamas, flannel, small dogs on them. He had his serious face on, which was different from his regular face in that he wore it like a tool. He was carrying a dead sparrow. She set down her mug. He placed it on the table in front of her, gently, the way you place evidence. "It fell out of the oak," he said. "I found it this morning." "Okay, baby." He sat down across from her. He looked at the bird. He looked at her. "It was sick," he said. "Not broken, sick inside." He paused. "Like Papa." She went still. "Papa has the sick inside," Eli said again. He said it the same way he said everything, precisely, with no performance, the same kind as the bird, but bigger and older. She looked at her son. She kept her face the way she'd learned to keep it, even, present, open. She had learned this watching Kael and then learned how to do it for reasons of her own. "How long have you known that?" she said. "Always," he said. "Since I was little." He placed both hands around the bird. Flat palms cupped slightly. He looked at it with that expression. The old one, the calculating one, the one too large for his 4-year-old face. The bird breathed. It sat up. It looked at Eli with one bright eye. It flew to the window and sat on the ledge, and was there for a moment, and then it wasn't. Eli looked at his hands. He looked at her. "I can't fix Papa's," he said. "His is too old. I tried." He folded his hands in his lap. "But I sit next to him at bedtime. It helps a little." Mara put her hands flat on the table. She breathed. "Good boy," she said. Her voice was steady. "Go get dressed. Petra's coming for breakfast." He nodded. He went back upstairs. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time looking at the window where the bird had been. Then she got up. She found him in the study. She didn't knock. She stood in the doorway and looked at him. He was at the desk. Papers, always papers. He looked up when she came in. He registered her face. She watched his own face do what it always did. Prepare, close, manage. "How long?" she said. The room was quiet. "The diagnosis was before you came," he said. She stood very still. before Brother Oswin drove to the bus station, before the letter was sent to your mother's elder. She looked at the desk, the papers, the reading glasses folded beside them, the mug of cold tea that had been sitting there since before she'd gone downstairs. How long do you have? He was quiet for a moment. The original timeline was 5 years from diagnosis. I'm at year 3. And with treatment? More. Possibly much more. The healers found something last year. There are options now that weren't there at the beginning. You've been treating it. Yes. Quietly. Yes. She pulled the chair that sat against the wall and dragged it across the floor and sat in it directly across the desk from him. She did not do this in a dramatic way. She did it the way she did everything. Thoroughly. He looked at her. You decided, she said, before you had ever met me, that I would not know, that you would bring a woman into your house and make her your mate and give her a child and not tell her you were dying. He said, I thought I was protecting you. From what? From losing something. From losing something I hadn't chosen yet. Yes. She looked at him for a long time. He held it. He didn't look away. She'd give him that. Whatever he'd done, he was not going to look away from it now. You made my choice for me, she said. You decided, before I had any information, what I could and couldn't handle. What I did and didn't deserve to know. Yes. You know that's not the same as protecting someone. I know, he said. I know that now. She put her elbows on her desk. She pressed her knuckles against her mouth. She breathed. What is it called? She said. The blood condition, he told her. He told her in the careful, factual language she had learned to recognize as the truest version of him. No cushioning, no softening, just the information, placed in front of her. He had learned it. He had been researching it for 3 years. He knew what every number meant. She listened to all of it. When he finished, she said, and Eli. Eli's gift has never appeared in a child who wasn't born to a terminal alpha, he said. The healers believe it's the body attempting continuation. A genetic response. There are theories that the same bloodline trait that causes the condition, it runs deep, it's been there for generations, also generates the compensatory gift in offspring. They'd never had a child survive long enough with the gift to study. They're studying Eli. With our permission, nothing invasive. They want to watch. They believe there are pathways in how his gift works that could inform treatment options that don't yet exist. She was quiet. He told me, she said, that he sits with you at bedtime, that it helps a little. Kael looked at the desk. I know he does. He started doing it on his own. He told me he tried to fix it and couldn't. He told me the same thing. His voice, for the first time in the whole conversation, changed slightly. A loosening, somewhere in the chest of it. He was very matter-of-fact about it. He said, I tried, Papa, but yours is very stuck, and then he leaned against me and went to sleep. Mara pressed her knuckles harder against her mouth. She was not going to cry. Not here. Not yet. There was too much to understand first. What was your plan? She said. I didn't have one. Yes, you did. You always have one. He was quiet for a moment. I thought, if I didn't let you know me, it would be easier. For you, when the time came. Easier for you to leave. Easier for you to lose me. That's not the same thing. No, he said. It isn't. She stood up. She pushed the chair back to the wall. She walked to the window and looked out at the kitchen garden. The mint had started again, pushing out of its borders, going wherever it felt it needed to go. I'm angry, she said. I know. I'm going to be angry about this for a while. Okay. And I'm going to need you to not manage me through it. I don't need to be handled. I need to be talked to. Okay, he said. His voice was different when he said it this time. Not managed. Okay. Just okay. She turned around. She looked at him across the room. She said, you don't get to decide when I leave. That's mine. That belongs to me. He looked at her. I'm not leaving, she said. I want to be clear about that. You've made a lot of decisions about what I'll do and what I can handle, and you've been wrong about all of them. I'm telling you now so we don't have to do this again. I'm not leaving. She went to the door. She stopped. Have lunch with us today, she said. At the kitchen table, not the pack table, just us. You, me, Eli, he said. Okay. She went downstairs. What happened next did not happen fast. That is the part of the story that people expect to skip over, the part where things don't resolve, where two people do not fall dramatically into each other, where there is no single scene that fixes what has been broken. What happened was slower than that. What happened was Tuesday mornings. Kael started coming to the greenhouse on Tuesday mornings. He did not ask, he just appeared. He sat in the corner where Eli usually sat, in the same way, not taking anything over, not redirecting, just present. She handed him things to hold when she needed both hands. He held them. He started talking. Not a lot. In the same careful, factual way he reported everything. But about himself, which was new. He told her about the year the pack was restructured, when he was 27, and the 3 months he'd spent not sleeping because he was afraid he'd made the wrong calls. He told her about his grandmother, the previous Alpha Queen, who had taught him to read the weather by the behavior of birds. He told her he had wanted to study architecture before the succession fell to him, that he could still draft a floor plan from memory and had no idea what he'd ever do with that information. She told him things back, her mother, the years of moving, the way she'd learned to love places quickly, on purpose, as a defense against losing them, the greenhouse, which was the first thing she'd tended that had stayed in one place long enough to grow. They talked in the greenhouse while the Tuesday light came through the glass, and Eli played in the dirt below the tomato cages. It was not dramatic. It was the thing under the drama, the slower thing, the thing that doesn't make it into the version of the story people tell, the actual texture of knowing another person, which is not a moment but an accumulation. Eli started sleeping between them, not every night. A few nights a week he'd pad down the hall and appear in Mara's doorway with his pillow, already determined. He would climb in. He would rearrange himself until he was in the position he had decided was correct. He would fall asleep with the completeness of a child who has no doubts about anything. The first time he did it on a night Kael was there, which started happening without announcement, the way things started happening in their house, without announcement. Eli looked at his father with great seriousness and said, "You're on my side." Kael looked at where he was lying. He was, technically, on the left side, which Eli had decided was his. He moved to the middle without a word. Eli climbed in on the left, put both hands flat on the mattress, considered the situation, and appeared satisfied. Mara lay on her side and looked at the ceiling and felt something in her chest that had been compressed for years start to loosen, like a fist unclenching, one finger at a time. She reached across Eli's sleeping form and put her hand on Kaelin's arm. He went still. Then he covered her hand with his. Eli slept between them. The owl said something outside. The trees answered. The healers came back with news in the summer. The new pathway they'd found, mapped partly from observations of Eli's gift, partly from research from a sister pack in Scotland who'd had a similar case 60 years ago, pointed to a treatment that had never been tried on this specific condition. The mechanism was new, the risks were real, the potential was, by the lead healer's exact word, significant. Kael sat with Mara in the study. His desk now had a second chair, pulled permanently from the wall, and they read through the documentation together. She asked the questions. He answered the ones he knew. They wrote down the ones neither of them knew and took them back to the healers. Eli, who had been told only that the doctors were trying to help his papa's sick, produced from somewhere a drawing of what appeared to be Kael, surrounded by a very large number of what Eli described as good things, which included 3 birds, a tomato plant, and what appeared to be the entire pack assembled in a circle. He gave it to his father. Kael looked at it for a long time. He folded it and put it in his breast pocket. It stayed there. Mara did not rearrange her greenhouse to accommodate a second work table because it was a gesture. She rearranged it because she needed the space, and she was the one who arranged things, and she made decisions about her own space without asking permission. The second work table was for Kael on Tuesday mornings. She did not tell him what it was for. She just stopped putting things on it. He started using it. He brought seeds he'd ordered from somewhere in the Netherlands, a heritage variety of something his grandmother had grown. He had looked up the growing requirements. He had written them on a card in his very precise handwriting. He showed it to Mara. She read it. "You're going to need to amend the soil," she said. "I know," he said. "Petra said you'd know the right mix." She looked at him. "I asked her," he said, with the equanimity of a man who has decided to stop managing things and start learning them instead. She showed him the right mix. They worked side by side on Tuesday mornings in the greenhouse, while Eli talked to the tomatoes, and the light came in through the glass, and outside the mint did whatever the mint wanted to do, because nobody was going to stop it now. The day she understood that the shelf in the back of her mind had always had a name, she'd just been avoiding reading it, was not a significant day. It was a Wednesday. Mid-morning. She came in from the kitchen garden to find Kael and Eli on the living room floor. Eli had assembled what appeared to be every pillow in the house into a structure. He was explaining the structure to his father with great specificity. Kael was lying on his side on the floor, listening with the complete attention he gave to pack logistics, to healer reports, to Mara across a dinner table. Eli finished the explanation. Kael said, "And the back left corner, is that structural?" Eli considered this. "Yes," he said, "but it's also decorative." Kael said. "Those are the hardest ones." Eli nodded gravely. Mara stood in the doorway with her muddy garden gloves and looked at this scene and read the label on the shelf. She went back to the kitchen garden. She sat down in the dirt between the rosemary and the sage, her mother's plants, the ones she'd brought from the apartment in a paper bag the day she packed, and she pressed her hands into the soil and sat there for a while. The mint was coming over the border again. She let it. That evening she stood in the kitchen making dinner, and Kael came in and stood beside her and started chopping vegetables without being asked, and she said, without looking up from the pot, "I love you. I want to be clear about that too." He stopped chopping. "You told me I didn't get to decide when I leave," she said. "I'm telling you now that I chose to stay before I knew the full story, which means the story was never the point." He was quiet. She looked up. He was looking at her with his face all the way open, not managed, not prepared, not closed, just open. The door into the dark room, except it wasn't dark anymore. She could see the whole thing. He put down the knife. He put one hand on the back of her head and pressed his forehead against hers. They stood there, in the kitchen, while the pot simmered. He said, very quietly, "I've been afraid since before you got here." She said, "I know. Not of dying," he said, "of this. Of it becoming real, and then having to go." "It's already real," she said. "It's been real. You just weren't letting yourself look at it," he breathed. She felt it, his chest, against hers, the exhale of something very old. "I know," he said. Eli appeared in the doorway. He looked at them standing there, foreheads together, her hand now on his chest, his on the back of her head. He regarded this situation with his usual clinical seriousness. "Are you hugging?" he said. "Yes," Mara said. "Good," Eli said. He went back to his pillow structure. Kael made a sound. It was the laugh again. The real one. The one she'd seen once at the soup incident. The one she'd catalogued and waited 2 years to hear again. This time it lasted longer. The treatment started in autumn. It was not easy. It was not a story where the difficult thing is simply resolved. There were hard weeks. There were weeks Kael was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the 2 a.m. papers. There were weeks Mara sat in the rocking chair on the porch, not reading her seed catalogs. Just there. Just present. Eli sat with his father every night. He had decided this was his job, and he did it with the reliability of someone who takes his job seriously. He would climb up beside him, press both hands flat on whatever surface was nearest, and exist there. He didn't try to fix. He had told Mara, very precisely, that he knew he couldn't fix it. He was sitting with it instead. Because sometimes, he said, with the serious face on, things need someone to sit with them. She looked at him. "Who told you that?" she said. He thought about it. "I figured it out from the birds," he said. She pulled him into her lap and held him, and he tolerated this for approximately 45 seconds before he had places to be. By the second winter, The healer's word had changed from significant to promising. Promising was a different thing than cured. Kael knew that. Mara knew that. They had learned, over 2 years, how to hold the difference between promising and certain without letting the gap between them swallow anything important. The treatment was working, slowly, imperfectly, in the way that real things work. Not a dramatic reversal, but a steady one. Numbers improving, energy returning. The particular quality of stillness he'd carried for years. The held breath quality. The man standing very quiet on his way out, beginning to change. He started sleeping. She noticed it first. He was in bed at a normal hour. He woke rested. She said nothing about it for a week because she did not want to jinx anything, and also because she had learned from him the value of allowing certain things to simply be true without announcing them. She woke up one morning to him awake beside her, not reading, not working, just lying there looking at the ceiling, and he turned his head and looked at her, and his face had that same open quality it had had in the kitchen, and he said, "I think this is working." She said, "I know." He said, "I haven't let myself think that." "I know," she said. "You can now." He looked at the ceiling again. "The greenhouse variety is going to need repotting in March," he said. "I know," she said. "I've been watching it. I want to do it," he said. "I want to be the one to do it." She turned her face into the pillow so he wouldn't see her expression, which was doing several things at once, and none of them were dignified. "Okay," she said, into the pillow, "it's yours." The last scene that belongs in this story is a Saturday morning in March. Mara was at the kitchen table. Tea, seed catalogs, the good light. The mint was coming in through the garden window on the east side, which was not technically possible, but there it was. A small green tendril finding a gap in the frame, just existing in the kitchen because it had decided the kitchen was where it wanted to be. Eli came downstairs. Pajamas, flannel with small dogs, serious face. He was not carrying anything. He sat across from her. He poured himself juice with the focused precision of a person who had opinions about how juice should be poured. He said, "Papa's outside." She looked up. "In the greenhouse," Eli said. "He's doing the repotting." She looked at the window. She could see, from the kitchen, the glass sides of the greenhouse, and inside it a figure, Kael, in the morning light, doing something careful with his hands. She looked at her son. Eli looked at his juice. "He's been out there since early," Eli said. "I checked." "You checked." "I wanted to make sure he was okay." He took a sip. He was okay. He was talking to the plants. Mara sat very still. She said, "That's something he learned from you." Eli considered this. "And from you," he said. "He learned it from watching you." She put both hands around her mug. The kitchen was full of morning light. Eli finished his juice. He stood up. He went to the door that opened to the garden, and he stopped, and he looked back at her. "Are you coming?" he said. She got up. She followed her son out through the kitchen garden, past the rosemary, past the sage, past the mint, doing whatever the mint wanted to do, and pushed open the greenhouse door. Kael was at the work table, the heritage variety, his seed card in his precise handwriting, propped against the pot, his hands in the soil. He looked up when they came in. Eli went and sat in his corner with the particular authority of a child who knows where he belongs. Mara went to her table. She picked up her gloves. She put them on. Outside the greenhouse, the territory was waking up. The ridge was light. Birds were doing something in the tree line. The oak that had dropped sparrows on Eli all his life was doing its slow spring thing, the buds coming in, the whole organism deciding once again to be alive. They worked in the quiet greenhouse, the three of them, while the morning moved around them. Nobody said anything for a while. Then Eli, from his corner, said to his tomato plant, "He's better today." The plant did not respond. Eli nodded anyway, as though it had. Mara kept her eyes on her hands. Kael pressed his palms into the soil around the seedling. He patted it once, firmly, the way you settle something into a place you want it to stay. The greenhouse held the warmth, the way it always did. The glass caught the light and kept it. Outside, the mint climbed. The birds said their piece. The ridge went gold. Inside, 3 people, 2 tables. One boy who had learned from sparrows how to sit with things that could not be fixed, and loved them anyway. That was enough. That was, it turned out, more than enough.